Greetings and welcome everyone to an overview of the 21st Century Teaching, Leading, and Learning. My name is Dr. Melanie Henson. I am at headquarters and I am the lead of the 21st Century Teaching, Learning, and Leading project. Our purpose today is to begin the preparation of the 21st Century Teaching, Learning, and Leading Preliminary Phase 1 implementation. Phase 1 will begin in the spring of 2014, while the actual implementation will occur in the spring of 2015. Let me introduce my colleagues who are with us today. Dr. Fran Austin, Acting Deputy Director, CIA of DoDEA. Dr. Terry Green, Deputy Director, CIA of Europe. And Dr. Joyce Lutry, Deputy Director, CIA of the Pacific. Again, we are delighted they are working with us today so that we can move this project forward as a team. Our outcomes for today are to understand the DoDEA 21st Century Professional Learning Framework and to focus specifically on how that professional learning framework impacts the professional learning development opportunities that will transform instructional practices. We want you to be able to articulate and to be able to eventually implement the collaborative 21st century teaching, learning, and leading structures. They are the integrated approach that support this entire program. Those three pieces are the digital professional learning, the staff development coach, and the professional learning communities. A second outcome that we want for each of you is to understand the role of the principal in leading a school to develop the 7 21st century skills. We want you to know that there is a difference between the 20th and 21st century school principal, and the 4 roles that the team thought were so critical are visionary, organizational, instructional, and collaborative. We're going to share with you a self-assessment that's in draft form, and we're going to talk about expectations. We're going to make connections to the Community Strategic Plan, MAPA, Advanced Ed, and Common Core State Standards. This is our professional learning framework graphic, and this represents a learning cycle. The professional learning framework provides a continuous, customized professional learning cycle that evolves to support and meet the needs of our educators over the next several years. The cycle is universal and applies to all learners and to all types of content. And when we work with the professional learning framework cycle, we always begin with the learner outcomes. The learning cycle begins in the center of our learning framework and focuses on the outcomes of the learner. Content knowledge and the 21st century skills, they are the 7 survival skills of Tony Wagner, combine to create the learner outcomes. The learner outcomes provide what is to be learned and demonstrated. DoDEA has adopted the Wagner survival skills. This graphic shows how the 21st century skills and the content standards work together. The 21st century skills are taught through the standards. Whether we use our DoDEA standards or the Common Core standards, content and skills together create the 21st century learner outcomes. The next piece of the cycle is reflection. So we move from the learner outcome development to reflecting on our own skill levels. Once we've established the 21st century skills and our learner outcomes, we begin to look then at how we know what we know and use these 7 rubrics, or the principal will use their self-assessment to determine what their needs are for instructional practice. There are 7 rubrics, and these 7 rubrics align with the 7 21st century skills. The 7 reflection and evaluation rubrics are designed for teachers and their students to use at the beginning of a lesson design and again at the end of a lesson cycle to evaluate the progress of learners after applying the 21st century skills to their work. Each rubric supports the growth of a student-centered classroom where students become more engaged in the learning process and then can apply the learner outcomes, that is their knowledge and skills, to the real world. The reflection section drives the educator's decision for instructional practice for professional learning. If you look at this rubric, you will notice there are 4 columns: entry, developing, approaching, and ideal. The teacher has to look at each of those sections and decide where they are in their own development of this 21st century skill, critical thinking and problem solving. Once the teacher does this, the teacher has the students do this, so that the teacher knows both where their skill level is in teaching this and where the students are and what they're doing, so that they can make some good decisions about what they need to learn to be able to become stronger and better at this work in the classroom. The next phase of the cycle is the Strands and Strategies. And once educators reflect on their level of readiness of the 21st century skills, they determine what pedagogical area in the toolbox will enrich their teaching and learning practice. Currently, there are 6 strands or categories of learning. Each strand has a minimum of 3 strategies that support the building of pedagogical knowledge in each strand. The strands are learning environment, student-centered instruction, curriculum integration, technology integration, military-connected child, and shared leadership. Educators will select from the toolbox, which we will probably eventually call the Digital Professional Learning Toolbox, the strand and the strategies that best support their learning. Once a teacher selects the best learning opportunity, the teachers are ready to begin learning and collaborating together. And this moves us to the next phase of the cycle, professional learning. The engagement in learning occurs during the professional learning or collaborative time frame. The learner or a group of learners delve into the choice of their learning. They work together using the professional learning guide that promotes inquiry, application, and data results of the learning. Professional learning communities provide educators time during the school day for job-embedded professional learning of their instructional practices. Teachers no longer have to solve problems alone, but begin to work together to change how they solve the problems of practice. And this moves us to another section of our learning cycle. Real-world application. Simultaneous with the collaboration phase that teachers are doing together, the learners apply their new skill sets appropriately. Leaders apply the learning to the context of the school and or the community. Teachers apply the learning of their work with the students in their classroom and or an aspect of the school. Students apply their classroom knowledge to their personal lives, their school, their community, and or to a global aspect of learning. Evidence of learning is gathered to determine how successful the application of that learning has been. Students are expected to be actively engaged in critical thinking, solving problems, to create new solutions by communicating and collaborating together. STEM, our science, technology, engineering, and math, has provided us the entry into application of knowledge to solve real-world problems for today and for the future. Project-based and problem-based learning are excellent student-centered instructional strategies that support the shift to 21st century teaching, learning, and leading and real-world application through those 21st century skills. And that leads us to the conclusion of this professional learning framework cycle. We always end the cycle with a reflection on the learning and its evidence of success. A new learning cycle grows from the data to place the learners on a continuous learning path. The continuous learning cycle's intent is to deepen knowledge and broaden its application to multiple aspects of life and work for all learners. Our goal is that you are able to articulate the professional learning framework and how this will support professional learning for all educators. As you visualize how 21st century teaching, learning, and leading will develop in your area, your district, and your schools, your ability to include others and to build their capacity will make all the difference. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Joyce Lutry, Deputy CIA, Deputy Director, CIA of the Pacific. Dr. Lutry?
Thank you. Well, to do all of this integrated learning that we're talking about with the cycle, with the learner outcomes, the real-world application, the reflection and evaluation, and the strands and strategies, that's really going to require a very integrated approach to the professional learning so that we can help our learners. And just like the learning cycle itself that we just reviewed, this is going to be very much an ongoing, interwoven, back and forth model that we use. The diagram that you see here has 3 rings or 3 loops. And here they're shown as two-dimensional, but you might also visualize those as being 3 interlocking rings, those metal rings sometimes that you see a circus performer use, where those rings can be stretched out, where they can be overlapping, where they can look like a Venn diagram. And that's very much how this looks. The 21st century teaching, learning, and leading has been designed as an integrated approach, a set of structures, if you will, that are going to support learning, teaching, and leading. And these 3 structures are really important. They're imperative to have in place for job-embedded professional learning to occur. And that's one of the key pillars of this whole process. So if we look here at the diagram, the piece that's in the top loop is the digital professional learning, and that's going to provide educators the Strands and Strategies toolbox of learning options that will be available digitally 24/7, so it's on demand in our global organization. From the digital professional learning toolbox, teachers, educators will be able to select the professional learning based on their reflection of their needs. We've talked about differentiation, and this will be totally customized to the individual teacher's needs. Once that reflection has occurred, teachers can then select and work with their colleagues in collaborative settings to learn and apply the new skills to practice. Then if you look at the middle loop, the staff development coach, you'll see this is a new position to support their school's teachers and their professional learning. It'll guide their learning into their classroom practice, and it'll be a teacher advocate, because these will be people that, like the actual deliverers of the 21st century teaching, leading, and learning, these staff development coaches will be there right alongside with them. So the position is solely based on teacher learning and support, and to focus on the student-centered classrooms. The bottom loop then is professional learning communities, and that'll be a system-wide professional practice that provides teachers the time to collaborate. It'll allow them to focus on teaching and learning and become analyze and help them analyze the student data to determine if new practices result in greater student learning. Now, in the fall of 2014, DoDEA is going to provide a systems launch, and for that I'd like to introduce Dr. Fran Austin, the DDES Acting Deputy Director, CIA.
Thank you. Welcome to the Principal Leadership Roles and Connections section of our webinar. We'd like to look at the principal leadership roles as tied to the 21st century critical skills that we've discussed, and also to the professional framework that we've discussed as well. Our CSP challenges us to educate, empower, and engage. And as we look at the roles and responsibilities of the 21st century principal, we see that 4 roles have been developed: visionary leadership, instructional leadership, organizational leadership, and collaborative leadership. Slide, please. Let's look a little bit more closely at 2 of the roles and competencies. The visionary leader. The visionary leader inspires and leads the development and implementation of a shared vision, the goals, and the plan. A key here is planning and having goals for an integrated 21st century and those skills that fall under within the 21st century. The instructional leader provides direction, coordination, and the resources for the improvement of curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Slide, please. Our other two roles and the competencies that fall within those. Organizational leadership. The effective 21st century DoDEA school leader develops and utilizes systems and protocols to manage people, data, processes, and to foster continuous school improvement. The collaborative role. The effective 21st leader builds and sustains strong and enduring relationships to engage, educate, and empower students. This particular collaborative leadership plays a huge role in the direct impact on morale and the readiness and the quality of life for our military partners. These four roles and their competencies were aligned in the development to MAPA, ISLIC, and NET-A. Slide, please. So what are the expectations as we look at the four roles and the responsibilities and the competencies within those roles? What are DoDEA's expectations of leaders? The superintendent and the principal have specific expectations. The superintendent will build the capacity in 21st century teaching, leading, and learning and make the connections to the already known and used systems that we use in DoDEA. They will support the integrated approach to 21st century teaching, leading, and learning, and participate in a district network team. These network teams will be developed in the future, and they will have the participation of superintendents and principals during these meetings. The superintendent will communicate and collaborate with the community and the command. The principal has similar responsibilities and expectations at the school level, building the capacity, implementing the connections, integrating the approach to 21st century teaching, leading, and learning, participating in the district network team meetings, and communicating and collaborating with the staff, the students, the parents, and the community. Next slide, please. Let's look a little bit more closely at the roles and the competencies and an example of those. DoD and OPM is requiring that we look more specifically at the competencies. So the School Administrator Competencies Work Group has been establishing the competencies more specifically for DoDEA leadership. An example is an occupational competency for school leadership, and highlighted here is the collaborative aspect. The underlying competencies, the flexibility, developing others, etc., we're highlighting influence and negotiating team building as a specific underlying competency. If we look to the right of the graphic, we see the knowledge that is needed for these underlying competencies. The definition of how we influence and negotiate team building is provided, and then the specific task under influence and negotiating team building. The DoDEA website has connections to these, and also within the handouts that you've received that are a part of today's webinar, you will see the 21st century teaching, leading, and learning self-assessment and reflection continuum for the 21st century leader. This is in draft format, but you're able to look and see, more importantly, what it is to be emerging with these competencies, to be implementing them at the school level and district level, and also to be at the level of sustaining these important roles and competencies. Slide, please. And with that, I'd like to thank you and then turn over the webinar for the Connections section for Terry Green, Dr. Terry Green, Deputy Director, CIA, Europe.
Hey, thanks very much, Fran, and welcome everybody. It's my pleasure to talk today about connections. I've long been a proponent of connections between every little bit of what we learn, because it's in the connections to me that shows the higher order thinking as we have to compare and contrast, as we relate to, as we delve deeper into different concepts to figure out how they relate to others. So this to me is a huge piece of what principals help faculties do, are make connections between all the different initiatives that we have in DoDEA and how they all fit together in one nice piece. Research pretty much shows or tells us as learners that people don't make connections easily, learners don't make them unless we help. So I think that's going to be a huge part of what principals are going to help faculties do. So if we take a look at this very first slide, I know you all have seen this before. I'm sure that your superintendents have talked about it. I'm sure that your directors have talked about it, that this pretty much is what our educational transformation is about. So you'll notice Common Core standards, aligned assessment, 21st century, which is what we're talking about today, digital learning environments, we're also discussing that, modern facilities, STEM, and the recruitment and retention of highly trained and qualified teachers and administrators. So these together really propel us forward in exactly what we're going to do on this journey that we've embarked on. Could we have the next slide, please? So if you take a look at the Community Strategic Plan, there are 5 specific goals, and we're going to really delve kind of in and talk about talent excellence. All these goals fit together, and they all, again, work with our transformation type initiatives to move us forward. But talent excellence has a lot to do with what we're talking about today and what principals are going to continue to be talking to faculties about. Basically, 21st Century really focuses on Goal 3, which is talent excellence. So we're focused on improving the development and empowerment of our employees, which is definitely Measure 5 on Goal 3. When you all get to know the CSP well, you'll see that Measure 5 talks about having a professional growth plan for all employees so that we're making sure we're building that talent and that capacity. We're also going to be looking at Measure 6, which under the new CSP talks specifically about building that knowledge structure for all employees on the application of moving us forward into the 21st century. By allowing our educators to select their own professional development to support their own growth, we're helping schools, students, our organization, and our military-connected community succeed. We're building our collaboration, our shared leadership, and preparing students for the future, which is definitely at the heart of this initiative. If you'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, on here we're talking about the CSP and Advanced Ed Connections. And when you look at this, I want you also to be thinking about school improvement plans, our continuous school improvement initiative, because that really is at the heart of what we do for Advanced Ed and for our schools. So we really want to talk about the way that these are aligned. Melanie Henson's done a great handout for you all that really kind of takes all the quality indicators under Advanced Ed and compares them or connects them, if you will, to the continuous school improvement, to our CSP and to all the different goals. This is going to be a really helpful piece for you all as you move forward in working with your faculties and helping them to keep these pieces connected. That's going to be a central point that needs to continue to happen. And realize that each of the indicators aligns with the CSP goal and that we as leaders purposely provide the staff with these connections and goals to the work we're doing, and that moves us forward into the excellence we're thinking. And then the very last slide, if you'll go on to that for my section, please, is all about organizational connections. So we've talked about this a little bit when we first started this session, but we really want to just make sure we keep those connections going. And under the new Jumpstart development for the 21st century, we've looked at developing some faculty quick chats. And the purpose of these chats is to help you as administrators show your faculties the connection between the standards and the requirements and the important work that they're doing for preparing our students. You haven't seen any chats yet, but they'll be coming. So it's important that we review these major DoDEA puzzle standards and segments so that you can keep that alignment going. And each faculty quick chat presentation will include slides and an overview that you or your teacher leaders can share with your faculty before you engage in a hands-on activity. So I think I'm turning this back over to Dr. Joyce Lutry. So thanks for today.
Thank you, Terry. Let's take a look at the time frame for implementing the 21st century teaching, learning, and leading. Next slide, please. You can see that phase 1 will start in the spring of 2014, just around the corner. And then you will see that there's a fall system-wide setup for 14, and then a phase 2 in the spring of 15. In the launch that's going to start in the spring of 14, there will be several components that we will have, and these will be integrated and structured. And those integrated structures will include receiving a staff development coach whose focus is school-based professional learning and supportive teaching and learning. This is one of those circles we looked at when we talked about the integrated professional development. Here's the coach that's going to be doing it. The staff development coach probably will be referred to as an SDC. This district ISSs will work hand in hand or hand in glove with these SDCs to support the teacher's practice. Another integrated structure for the phase 1 will be receiving a 5-day jumpstart training that's going to provide an overview of the 21st century teaching, learning, and leading, the nuts and bolts of organizing a school move and transition into a 21st century school, and training on one student-centered instructional strategy. And the one that we've selected is going to be the project-based learning. So that training, that 5-day jumpstart training, will start with that strategy. Another integrated structure for that will be receiving the digital professional learning, which is a result of the Strands and Strategies development we looked at earlier in this presentation. Teachers will select their learning from this 24/7 professional learning toolbox, so it will be on demand for their needs and their time frames, which is pretty fascinating when we consider our worldwide organization and all our time zones. Once selected, teachers will work in professional learning communities to learn and apply their skills to their practice. Another component for the phase 1 will be receiving district network team meetings for leadership and the SDC. These monthly meetings will provide time to plan, develop, and discuss problems of practice as a district team to implement the 21st century teaching, learning, and leading. Now, then if you look over one, you will see all districts will begin in the spring with a district network team meeting. So we're not just looking at the 15 schools, but all schools. And then in the fall of 14, it will be a system-wide professional learning coming on board all professional learning communities. In that fall of 14, all schools will begin with this professional learning communities, and a vendor will support this work, this project, for a 3-year commitment. Phase 2 then will include all the remaining schools, all but these 15, and they will receive the same components we just reviewed with you that were in phase 1. So modifications will be based on this plan, as always, as we do continuous improvement from the feedback of the first schools. Next slide, please. While these are always subject to change as events overtake us and things like that happen, this is the current listing of the 15 schools that will be in phase 1. And you can see on this the 15 schools cover the 3 areas that we have, and you will also see that they have been selected because they are being built within a certain time frame and will be ready to implement our standards. So now let me take this over to Melanie, and Melanie, if you'd like to wrap it up, please. Thank you.